I've been driving trucks for years. You see a lot of strange things out on the road, things you can't always explain. I used to brush them off, chalk them up to exhaustion, tricks of the eye, maybe a little too much caffeine messing with my head. But after what happened that night in West Texas, I stopped trying to explain. Some things out here don't want to be understood. It was about 2 a.m., and I was heading west on an empty stretch of highway. The rain had been coming down in waves, sometimes easing up, sometimes hitting so hard my wipers could barely keep up. I had the radio low, the hum of static filling the cab. The road was dark, no streetlights, just the occasional reflective marker flashing as I passed. I hadn't seen another vehicle in nearly an hour. Then I saw the headlights. They appeared in my mirrors out of nowhere, far behind me at first, just two small pinpricks in the rain. I kept my speed steady, expecting them to gain on me, but they didn't. They just lingered in the distance, too far back to make out the vehicle, but too close to ignore. I adjusted my mirror. The lights seemed off. Not quite white, not quite yellow. They had this strange, bluish tint, like old halogen bulbs struggling to stay lit. The minutes dragged on, and they never got closer, never drifted further. Just followed. Then my radio crackled. "Why'd you leave me behind?" The voice was barely above a whisper, but I heard it clear as day. I grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" Nothing but static. I checked my mirrors again. The lights were still there, glowing faintly through the rain. I flipped the CB to another channel, hoping to pick up a fellow driver, but the frequency was dead. No chatter. No life. Just me, the road, and those lights. Then they disappeared. 1 second, they were there. The next, gone. I glanced in my mirrors, then over my shoulder, but the highway behind me was empty. For the first time in years, I felt something I don't like to admit, fear. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept my eyes straight ahead. A minute passed. 2. The rain slowed. Then the lights came back. But they weren't behind me anymore. They were on the side of the road. Not headlights. Not a car. Eyes. 2 glowing, blue-white eyes, staring at me from the shoulder. I only saw them for a second before I flew past, my truck rattling in the wind. I didn't dare look in my mirrors. I pressed down on the gas, heart pounding. I needed to get off this highway. The next truck stop was still 30 miles out, but I wasn't stopping for anything until I reached it. Then my CB crackled again. "You were supposed to wait for me." I swore under my breath. My hands were slick with sweat, the leather of the wheel damp beneath my fingers. I didn't know what was worse, the voice, or the fact that it sounded so familiar. Like someone I should know. Like someone I'd forgotten. The rain picked up again, heavier than before. My wipers thumped back and forth, barely making a difference. The world outside blurred into a smear of gray and black. Then, up ahead, I saw something standing in the middle of the road. A person. They weren't moving, just standing there, head slightly tilted, watching me approach. I honked my horn, expecting them to jump, to run, but they didn't. They just stood there. Too close now. No time to stop. I swerved, my tires screeching against the wet pavement. The truck fishtailed, the trailer swinging wide. I fought the wheel, my pulse pounding in my ears. The truck groaned, tires struggling for traction, then, finally, I straightened out. I sucked in a sharp breath. And then I looked to my right. The figure was there. Outside my passenger window. Running alongside the truck. Keeping pace, their face inches from the glass. I saw them. I saw them clearly. Their skin was pale and wet, like something that had been left in the rain for too long. Their eyes were empty sockets, glowing that same eerie, bluish-white light. Their mouth, if it was even a mouth, was slightly open, their lips stretched thin over jagged teeth. They shouldn't have been able to keep up. No one can run that fast. But they did. Then they grinned. I slammed the accelerator. The truck surged forward, tires skimming over the wet road. The figure fell behind, their glowing eyes shrinking into the darkness. And then, just like that, they were gone. I didn't let off the gas. Not for another 20 miles. When I finally reached the truck stop, I pulled in under the brightest lights I could find. I parked, locked my doors, and sat there, hands still gripping the wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. I checked my mirrors. The highway was empty. For a long time, I just sat there, listening to the rain, waiting for my pulse to slow. Then, finally, I let out a shaky breath and grabbed my phone. I pulled up my call history, scrolling back through the past few weeks, then months. No unknown numbers. No missed calls from familiar voices. But somehow, I knew, if I had answered that one call I must have ignored, if I had picked up instead of letting it go to voicemail, I would have heard that same voice, asking why I left them behind. I had been on the road for almost 16 hours, pushing my luck with the DOT limits, but I needed to make my drop before sunrise. The backroads of Louisiana weren't the best place to be during a storm, but my dispatcher had rerouted me due to highway closures, and I didn't have much of a choice. I figured I'd take it slow, keep my eyes on the road, and hope the rain let up before I hit the next town. The road was 2 lanes, surrounded on both sides by dense swamp. The kind of place where the trees grow too close together, their branches hanging low like skeletal fingers reaching for passing vehicles. My high beams barely cut through the thick sheets of rain, and my wipers struggled against the downpour. I hadn't seen another car in almost an hour. No tail lights ahead, no headlights behind. Just me, my truck, and the endless, suffocating blackness pressing in from all sides. Then my CB crackled. It startled me, the sudden burst of static breaking through the silence. I hadn't heard another trucker on this channel for hours. "You ain't alone out there, driver," a voice muttered through the static. I frowned, grabbing the radio. "Who's this?" Silence. I checked my mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. I glanced at the GPS, making sure I was still on the right route. Everything seemed normal, until I looked back at the road. There was something standing in my lane. I barely had time to react. I yanked the wheel to the right, my tires skidding on the wet pavement as I fought to keep control. My trailer swung wide, nearly jackknifing before I managed to correct. My heart was pounding as I struggled to catch my breath. I checked my mirrors again. The road was empty. There hadn't been a thud, no impact. But I knew what I had seen. A figure. Tall. Thin. Motionless. Not a deer, not a person, something else. I grabbed the radio again. "If that was you messing around, you almost made me wreck." Not funny. Static. Then, whispering. Low, garbled, like someone speaking through water. The words weren't in English, weren't in any language I recognized. They didn't sound human. I turned the volume down and focused on the road, willing my nerves to settle. I just needed to get to the next stop, get some coffee, and get my head straight. A few minutes passed. Then something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned my head just slightly, and my stomach dropped. The thing was running alongside my truck. It was keeping pace, moving faster than anything on 2 legs should have been able to. I couldn't see it clearly through the rain, but I could make out its shape. It was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its torso too narrow. Its head, if you could call it that, was featureless. No eyes, no mouth. Just smooth, wet skin reflecting the glow of my lights. And then, it turned its head toward me. Even without eyes, I felt it watching me. I slammed the gas. My engine roared as I pushed the truck harder than I should have, the speedometer climbing past what was safe for the conditions. The thing outside didn't slow. I could hear it now. A wet, slapping sound, like bare feet against pavement. Its arms, too long, too thin, reached toward the truck, its fingers scraping against the side of my cab. Then, without warning, it dropped back. Just vanished into the rain. I kept my foot on the pedal, refusing to slow down. The truck stop was only a few miles ahead, and I needed to get off this road. My knuckles were white on the wheel, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Then, my radio crackled again. "You shouldn't have let it see you," the voice from earlier whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't ask who they were or what they meant. Because I already knew. And I knew, without a doubt, that it was still out there, somewhere in the rain, waiting for the next driver who wasn't paying attention. I've been driving trucks for over 20 years. The road becomes your home, your companion, your enemy. You learn the patterns, the sounds, the silence. But sometimes, the road gives you something that doesn't fit. Something that makes no sense. This happened in 2011, somewhere along Route 50 in Nevada, better known as the loneliest road in America. If you've never driven it, imagine an endless stretch of nothing. No streetlights, no houses, no towns, just desert and mountains so empty they feel ancient, like they're watching you. I had been on the road since early afternoon, hauling a load of industrial equipment towards Sacramento. It was one of those moonless nights where the darkness feels heavier, pressing in on you. I was planning to stop at a small truck stop about 40 miles ahead, grab some coffee, and rest a bit before pushing on. That's when I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder, just past the glow of my high beams. He wasn't waving for help, wasn't moving, just standing there, staring as I passed. He was wearing dark clothes, but what stuck out was his face. It looked wrong. Almost blurry, like I wasn't really seeing it clearly. My stomach twisted, but I chalked it up to fatigue. You see weird things when you've been driving too long. I kept going, shaking it off, but then, 20 miles later, he was there again. Same spot on the shoulder, same stance. Same blurred face. I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. There was no way he could have gotten there before me. Not unless he had a car, but I hadn't seen any vehicle, no tire tracks, nothing. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was some kind of shadow, a trick of the headlights. But my gut wouldn't let it go. Something was wrong. And then it got worse. 5 miles from the truck stop, I saw a shape in the road. At first, I thought it was a deer or some roadkill, but as I got closer, I realized it was him. Lying in the middle of the lane. Arms at his sides. Eyes open. Staring. I slammed on the brakes. My truck groaned as it came to a stop, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I grabbed my flashlight, hand shaking as I stepped out onto the pavement. The desert was silent, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I approached slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on him. He wasn't moving. Not even blinking. "Hey," I called out. "You all right?" Nothing. I took another step closer. And that's when I saw it. His mouth, stretched into a grin. A wide, unnatural grin that didn't match the rest of his face. Like his skin was just barely holding itself together. Then he blinked. Not normal. Not natural. His entire eye, all white, slid sideways. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back, my foot slipping on loose gravel. My flashlight flickered, and in that half-second of darkness, he moved. Not like a man getting up. Not like anything I've ever seen. He jerked, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. 1 second he was flat on the ground, the next, standing upright, inches from me. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted for my truck, slamming the door and locking it in one motion. My breath came in sharp gasps as I fumbled for the ignition. My headlights flicked on, cutting through the dark, but the road was empty. He was gone. My foot hit the gas, tires screeching as I tore down the highway. I didn't stop at the truck stop. I didn't stop at all until I hit the outskirts of Sacramento, where the neon lights of a 24-hour diner felt like salvation. I sat there in my truck, hands still shaking on the wheel. I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination from too many hours alone on the road. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, one thing stayed with me. The grin. I haven't driven Route 50 since. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing.